Hi, welcome to the 10th lesson in the education topic, and this lesson we're going to focus on processes within school, but look at what different theories think about what happens within school. So by the end of this lesson, hopefully you'll be able to tell me how functionalists, Marxists, interactionists and feminists see the internal processes within school and how these will affect achievement. The key vocabulary for this lesson is the same as last lesson because this filters on from what we did last lesson. So as a starter, what might be quite good for you is to have a little think about and a recap of what do functionalists think about the family, what do Marxists think about the family, feminists think about the family, and then what do they think about the functions of education, so what is the point of education. So again, feel free to pause and work through at your own pace. Now, this lesson is going to focus on the key theories as we go through. Now, there's a number of ways you can do this. You can make notes in your book, pause and kind of jot down key elements. You could also do a big mind map at the end and kind of use it and do it that way. It's really up to you how you kind of do this. It is going to be a little bit lectury, but I'll try and go through it at quite a pace. So all the functionalist ones will have the big happy emoji at the top. Obviously, because from what we've done, functionalists normally see the more positive side of situations. So, Durkheim, who we did previously when we looked at functions of education, liken the processes within school to like a society in miniature. And he said that the focuses within secondary education, focus on secondary socialisation, so like learning norms and values and getting to be kind of social beings, getting you kind of ready for society. Functionalists also talk about, so Talcott Parsons, who we've also all done when we did family, but also when we did education functions. So he looked at the idea of what Durkheim came up with and said that classrooms promote particularistic standards. This basically means it's more looking at individuals and making sure that you're all being treated kind of individualistically. And Davis and Moore, who we will come to later as well, and we have touched upon already, they said that school is like getting ready for your future roles. So making sure that you're all kind of suited into the right jobs. Not everyone can be a brain surgeon, so filtering out people for the right kind of jobs, and this is called role allocation. Then we've got functions talking generally about how, functions can be criticised. If you think about everything that they've talked about with things like the family, they often see things from a really positive kind of point. And within education, they see it as this kind of passive system. So everyone goes into school, you have knowledge poured into you, and you all do really well. However, obviously, that isn't the case. There's a variety of outcomes from education. Some do better based on their social class, gender, and ethnicity. So not everyone has the same experience of education. So if you think about it, and this might be one for you to ponder, is does everyone have the same positive experience of school? Who do you think probably doesn't have such a positive experience? So that's your functionalism. Nice, straightforward. Marxists, obviously angry emoji, because they're going to see the exploitation side of things. So they argue that actually the purpose of schooling and internal process within school is about cultural reproduction. This is making sure that certain social classes, particularly the working class, are ready to be exploited for capitalism, ready to go into kind of lower paid jobs. And Bordeaux, who's the guy at the bottom looking serious, he describes how working class characteristics, such as the certain subjects that they might choose, their knowledge, maybe how they speak, are undermined by teachers within schools. So they don't embrace their kind of culture, their working class culture. It's kind of frowned upon. And this has a really posh term. So within this topic, it is called something called symbolic violence. So this idea that working class people are not respected for their kind of culture and are kind of being looked down upon is called symbolic violence. Again, another French guy. So this guy is called Althusser, and he's also a Marxist, and he suggested that the education system is all about getting young people to realise that there's inequalities, and this is done generally through the hidden curriculum. So you learn to respect authority, you learn that there's punishments, you learn that you have to be obedient, you have to obey to those people above you, and then that will fit when you go into kind of capitalism and kind of capitalist industries and things like that, it kind of fits in with that you've got somebody above you and you have to respect them. This bit has got a lot in it, but actually it's quite straightforward. So more recently, there's been other sociologists, so Rukowski says that the marketisation of education, which we did about 2 lessons ago, that's where education's you have to sell it and people can pick and choose what schools they go to and you all have to compete, has added to kind of stress and this feeling of alienation, not only for pupils but for teachers as well. So I personally, the day you will all sit your exam, will be just as nervous as you will be sitting your exams. So it could be that for students and teachers, this stress is because of pressures for exam results. You know, schools want to get the best results, students want to get the best results possible. So it does create this kind of feeling of stress. And he also argues that the growth of kind of, you know, academies, the private sector running certain schools, is that schools now are about making profit as well as maybe, or more important than imparting knowledge. So for some schools, it's about kind of making money. But if we think about it, critiques of Marxists would always say that Marxists are too negative and ignore, actually, education can be really good. So for instance, for me, if I'd not done well in school and not gone to university, you know, I might have been stuck in a cycle of deprivation perhaps and not been able to kind of move up. So it does have its benefits. So the way I like to think about it, think Goldilocks. So your functionalism, you know, this theory is too positive. They generally only see the kind of good sides of things. You've got your Marxism, which is, you know, well, this theory is too negative. They're generally looking at that. So we're really looking for kind of a new theory. So what other theory could we use? So, interactionist. Interactionists we'll do in this topic, and we will look at, particularly when we do crime, they're a good theory to know. Sounds really complicated. All they're really talking about is labelling theory. So, interactionists examine the processes that are occurring within schools and classrooms and looking at how your actions kind of have meaning to them. So, for instance, within schools and institutions, we do label students, whether it's conscious or not. And obviously that can have a big impact on students and how you experience school, whether you've been positively labelled or negatively labelled. So, Becker, again, we will come back to him when we do crime as well, said that found teachers viewed middle class pupils as the kind of ideal type of pupil, whereas working class were kind of the furthest away from that ideal, and they were like lacking interest, not motivated. And obviously that can then become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So this kind of links into what we looked at last lesson, that you can embrace that label. If teachers are kind of seeing you negatively, you might end up in lower sets, it might affect your self-confidence, and then you can obviously fulfill that label. And labels are often given to students on the basis of their appearance. It could be how they speak, their attitudes, and, you know, I'd like to think I don't judge students, but you do. It's a natural thing that people do judge without knowing like the potential, your abilities. You know, if you come in looking scruffy, kind of swearing and all that, teachers are going to form opinions of you without really knowing what your ability is. So once a pupil has been given this label, it can then obviously have quite bad effects on the students. It could affect then the kind of sets or bands that they're put into, how they experience school. And teachers label pupils based on their social class background, but it could also be things on like ethnicity or gender. So for instance, feel free to pause and have a look at these. How would you label, or what kind of students do you think all of these individuals would be? Do you think they're high achieving? Do you think they're going to go on to college? Do you think they're going to sixth form? Do you think they're going to university? Do you think they hand in their homework on time? What's their presentation like? If you had to kind of judge them, how would you do that? So to carry on with the interactionist view then, critics against it kind of say, well, it's a bit too deterministic. By this, it means, well, just because I'm saying, oh, you know, this student's going to fail, not all students take that on board and go, well, I'm going to fail, so what's the point? You know, it's placing too much importance on the label. For some students, you actually reject that label. I'm sure some of you have had people say negative things about you and you've kind of had the attitude, well, I'm going to show you. So while they can be dangerous, it could kind of motivate you in the opposite way. So if I said to you, well, you're never going to pass sociology, you might decide, well, actually, I'm going to show you. Obviously, I would never say that to you, but those kind of things, you don't have to embrace the label. So Willis is another key study. Now, he pops up time and time again. So again, when we do crime, a lot of the explanations for failure in education link to why people would commit crime. So bear that in mind while you're doing this. So what I'd like you to do is have a go at answering the 4 questions. The key study for Willis is on page 148 in the textbook, and the textbook is on the shared area. If you have any problems with it, let me know. And then finally, feminist. So this links into kind of still the gender divide. So while girls succeed, girls are like, woohoo, doing really well. One of the problems that feminists highlight is that while girls are continuing to do really, really well, all we ever seem to focus on is, well, white boys failing. And actually we ignore how great girls are doing. Schools continue to kind of support this more patriarchal ideology, preparing girls perhaps for lower paid jobs, weaker economic positions. There's studies looking at, in terms of the types of jobs that girls go into, they're more likely to be part-time or lower paid. Not all the way, but, statistically. And the continued gender pay gap, feminists would suggest is evidence that actually the education system's then failing to promote the interests of girls, because there is still this gendered subject choice. I think in year 10 there's probably a handful of girls doing things like computing, for instance. Why is it still that computing is quite a lucrative career perhaps to go into, and yet girls are not choosing that? Whereas maybe some girls are maybe encouraged to go into things like perhaps textiles. Why do we still have this gendered subject choice? So critics argue that while issues in the workplace stubbornly remain, things are starting to improve. So for instance, teachers and schools are, wanting girls to succeed, mostly because, it helps with the exam results. And Louise Archer, who's a sociologist who we'll look at again later, says that actually, even though schools and teachers are working really hard, there are still this group of underachieving, perhaps working class girls, who will still adopt anti-school subcultures and just, fail by their own means. So again, as I said at the start, what might be good is to create kind of a mind map outlining kind of what the 4 key theories think about education and how stuff inside school is going to affect your achievement. And to finish off, I'm sorry, I feel like I've gone through this super quick, but my video app only gives me a 15-minute limit, so, have to. But again, feel free to go through at your own pace. Here are 2 questions that I'd like you to have a go at. Feel free to email me your responses and I can have a look at them. So firstly, identify and explain 2 ways in which labelling influences your achievement. This could be in a positive way or in a negative way, so have a little think about that. And again, have a think about subcultures. So those are in school, they could be pro or anti-school, how they could influence your achievement. So, I hope that's all okay. I do feel like I've kind of gone through it super quick. Feel free to go back through, email me if you have any questions. Some of this we will go back over because this is kind of key things. I hope you're all doing well and I will see you next week. Bye.